Welcome to the Kansas City Sports History Podcast. My name is Matt Starr, and I'm your host. Today, our guest is Dave Pomeroy. Dave is working on a documentary about the Kansas City Athletics baseball team. Dave, do you have any opening remarks for our group today before we begin with questions?
Well, one of the things that, of course, we're doing the documentary on the history of the Kansas City A's, and it was pretty much lost. There are documents here and there, film, photographs, but very little. I did some research at the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, and they have very little about the A's. And it just felt like it was time to get a video documentation of the history of the team that was in Kansas City for 13 years.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, before the A's moved here, the Kansas City had the minor league team, the Kansas City Blues, and the Monarchs of the Negro Leagues. And the Chiefs had not even been moved here. That was a pretty big step, wasn't it?
Right. The move of the Philadelphia A's to Kansas City really opened up Major League Baseball in Kansas City. Of course, made Kansas City a major league team and led to the Kansas City Chiefs and I think to professional hockey and basketball, which unfortunately, of course, has been lost in Kansas City.
Yeah, the A's moved from Philadelphia in 1955 to Kansas City and stayed here until 67. I guess there were no winning seasons for the A's, unfortunately.
No, there were no winning seasons. You mentioned earlier the Kansas City Blues of the American Association. They were quite successful as the number one farm team of the New York Yankees, and of course the Kansas City Monarchs were legendary. They were major league quality for sure. But the team that came from Philadelphia was not the greatest team at that point. They had languished near the bottom or at the bottom of the American League for a long time. And I think the Kansas City Blues of 1954 were probably a better team than the Kansas City A's of 1955.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, once the A's were determined to come to Kansas City, there were some very quick renovations that had to be made to Municipal Stadium as far as adding another deck to it, the stadium.
Right. It was a minor league ballpark used by both the Blues and the Kansas City Monarchs, but they needed to increase the capacity in order to accommodate Major League, American League baseball team. Mm-hmm. So they did add a second deck, which was done in amazing short period of time. I can't remember exactly how long that took, but it was over the winter, and it was it was done. Uh-huh. The field looked pretty bad when they opened in April of 1955, but mm-hmm. the seating capacity had been increased, and they really did need that for Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, tell us about how you decided to make a documentary about the A's. What led you to do that?
Well, as I say, the history of the team pretty much had been lost, and there had been no video documentation of the team. And I was working at public television station KTWU in Topeka. I did grow up in the Kansas City area, mm-hmm. but I was working and retired at Channel 11 in Topeka. But one of the projects that I was talking about before I left was doing a documentary on the history of the A's. But before I really got started on that, I retired, and I was talking to independent producer Linda Haskins, who goes by the name of Sam Haskins, and she asked if I had any program ideas. She was looking for a film to produce at that point. And I said, one of the things I would like to do is a history of the Kansas City A's. And she had also grown up in Kansas City. In fact, we both went to Shawnee Mission East High School, although she's younger and I didn't know her at that point. But she remembers the A's as well as I did. Mm-hmm. And she liked the idea, and we decided to get together and produce that documentary. It's been close to 10 years now, but one of the first things that we wanted to do was to get players on tape. We're doing it in high definition for public broadcast, which would be Channel 19 in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And we started taping, and fortunately we did, because Some of those players, unfortunately, have passed away.
Okay.
And so we do have on tape many players who can't be interviewed today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very valuable resource.
Right. Well, there's quite a few trades between the A's and other teams, especially the New York Yankees, I think, and a lot of trades that seem to be kind of one-sided towards the Yankees. Can you talk about some of that?
Yeah, there was a real connection between the Kansas City A's and the New York Yankees, some of which we'll get into in the documentary. But the Philadelphia A's, of course, were located not too far from New York City, approximately 100 miles, and so there was an American League team in Kansas City, in Philadelphia, and a Major League team in New York. And the New York Yankees wanted that trade area, didn't want the competition, although, the Yankees have done very well over the entire history of the American League. But they knew the A's were in trouble, and so they wanted them to move to Kansas City. Part of it was because Arnold Johnson owned Yankee Stadium and Municipal Stadium in Kansas City. And he wanted the team, the Yankees wanted the team into Kansas City. They, of course, would get some financial reward for giving up that territory. Mm-hmm. And the Kansas City Blues then moved to Denver and became the Denver Bears. So that connection was early on, and there were, I guess you might call it, some shenanigans that took place. And Gus Erniel, who was an outfielder for Philadelphia A's and later the Kansas City A's, in the documentary talks about some of the behind-the-scenes things that took place to make sure that the Kansas City A's became the Kansas City A's, Philadelphia A's became the Kansas City A's, and how they dealt with Connie Mack in order for Arnold Johnson to purchase the team to move to Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of trades between the Kansas City A's and the New York Yankees over the Arnold Johnson years. And one of the people that have documented that in a book is Jeff Katz, who is lives in Cooperstown, New York. In fact, he at this point is mayor. He wasn't at the time, but he wrote a book, The Kansas City A's and the New York Yankees, and the trades between the two of them, mm-hmm. comparing the advantages. Some people say the A's came out ahead. Most people seem to think the Yankees came out ahead, and that basically the Kansas City A's were now a farm team of the New York Yankees. But a lot of players were traded back and forth, and some people think the Roger Maris trade to Cleveland then ended up with Maris going eventually to the New York Yankees. But mm-hmm. Jerry Lumpy, Norm Seaburn, a lot of players in there ended up with the Yankees, and vice versa. They would, a lot of them went one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Imagine the possibilities of the Kansas City A's had kept all those guys together a period of time, and what could have happened. Right.
The A's never had a winning season in Kansas City in 13 years. And there were some great players. Yeah. And if all those players had been on the team at the same time, of course, it would have been a great team. The first year was, I guess, the most surprising because they had done very poorly in Philadelphia, but they were inspired when they came to Kansas City because they actually had fans, and they were quite excited. And here again, it's Gus Erniel talks about, they came out on the field and, they just couldn't believe that they're, playing in front of so many home fans when there were so few in Philadelphia, and they had a big parade when the team moved there. And it was exciting, an exciting time. I was living in Overland Park at the time, and I remember the team moving to Kansas City and how exciting that was.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was some draft choices the Kansas City A's made by being lower in the position as far as wins and losses. So they had some pretty good picks, including folks like Reggie Jackson, Rick Monday, Can you talk about any of that?
Well, that came towards, of course, the end of the tenure of the A's in Kansas City, and Charlie Finley was starting to amass some players there towards the end, was aggressively building a team. They finished last in 1967 as the Kansas City A's, but the team then in 1968 moved to Oakland, where they are today, and had those great championship teams of the early 70s. You mentioned Reggie Jackson, there's Sal Bando, Campy Campaneris, a lot of good players. And I think everybody in Kansas City knew that the team was going to ultimately be very successful. And, of course, we all regretted that they weren't doing that in Kansas City, but were doing it in Oakland.
Mm-hmm. Right. Who are your favorite Kansas City A's players?
Well, I have several. I guess one of my favorites is Vic Bauer. He played with the Kansas City Blues,
Okay.
and then ended up, of course, in one of the trades with the Yankees.
Oh.
Ended up in Kansas City. Played. I remember him particularly playing first base, and some of the great plays that he made over there. He was very colorful. He drew a lot of attention off of the baseball field as well as on the playing field.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my favorite players, I guess, really come from those first years because of the impression that Major League Baseball made on me. Although the team at the end was a great team, even though they finished last, they were a team in the building. But Joe Astroth, catcher, Bobby Shantz, who had won 24 games, I think, in 1952 for the Philadelphia A's, was there. His brother, Billy Shantz, was catcher along with Joe Astroth. Joe DeMaestri, shortstop. Gus Cernial, of course, he was one of my favorites, playing left field. Wasn't the greatest outfielder by any means, but could sure hit the ball.
Okay. Well, there was lots of noteworthy players for the A's over the years that maybe had a better career at other places. Roger Maris, Hank Bauer, Marv Throneberry, Don Larson, Norm Seaburn, Rocky Colavito, Bob Cerv. You mentioned Vic Bauer, Enos Slaughter, Bert Campaneris, Catfish Hunter. The list goes on. Yeah.
It's a long list, and we do have interviews with some of those players, including Bob Cerv, who played left field. He was a power hitter, and he was from Nebraska. Went to the University of Nebraska, played football. Big, tough guy. And in 1958. He hit 38 home runs for the Kansas City A's, which remains a Kansas City Major League Baseball record. No player for the Kansas City A's or the Kansas City Royals has hit more home runs in a season playing for a Kansas City team than Bob Cerv did.
Oh, that's great.
And in the year that he hit those 38 home runs, he broke his jaw sliding into home plate.
Wow.
I think he missed one game. They had to wire his jaw shut, essentially, and he drank only liquefied food. They would grind up steaks, and he would drink them through a straw. But he kept playing, and as I say, set that Major League Kansas City record of 38 home runs. And we do have an interview with him for the documentary where he talks about that season. And I think when people think of Bob Cerv, they think of that play and the courage he had to finish the 1958 season and do so well.
Didn't he play in the home run derby they had back on TV in those days?
I don't recall that. If there was a home run derby, I'm sure he was in it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, even Satchel Paige for one game.
Yeah.
Played for the Kansas City A's. What a legend! I mean, what an incredible game that would have been to see.
Well, I did see that game.
Oh, you did? Oh, great.
And that was, to see Satchel Paige out there, one of the greatest pitchers of all times, and Satchel Paige night, and they'd have him sitting in a a rocking chair out. I think it was in left along the left field line, maybe in right field. But I think I don't remember now which side it was on, but there was a nurse out there in a white uniform. Not that he needed a nurse, but it's just part of Charlie Finley's showmanship to make it so dramatic. But I think he gave up his Boston Red Sox. I think he gave up one hit in I can't remember now how many innings.
I think about 3.
Yeah, it seemed like I think you're right. I think it was 3 innings, and I can't remember now exactly how old he was, but
they say 59, 60, but who knows how old he really was?
I don't think he really knew how old he was. And there was always a question of how old is Satchel Paige, but obviously he could still pitch.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's great. Then there was Campy Campaneris night, where he played all 9 positions. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I went to that game as well.
Oh, great.
And really, I went because of that, because I knew he would be playing all 9 positions. And he finished up as catcher. He got injured at the end with a play at home plate, but, he did well in all of those positions. Very talented player. I saw him about a month ago in Oakland when the Kansas City Royals and the Oakland A's played. They had a salute to the Kansas City A's night, and they had Campy Campaneris and Blue Moon Odom there riding in convertibles on the field. And Campy looks great. I mean, older than he looks. He looks real good. He went around and riding the cars, waving at everybody, and of course, very popular player in Oakland. And the crowd there, both for he and Blue Moon Odom, was quite appreciative of them and treated them very well.
Yeah, great. Tell us about some of the Kansas City A's coaches and managers. Any of those stand out?
Well, the first manager was Lou Boudreau, and he got the highest finish of any season of the Kansas City A's, and that was in 1955 when they came in 6th. We also talked to Eddie Joost, who was the last manager in Philadelphia for the Philadelphia A's, and he talks about how bad the team was that Kansas City inherited, and so Lou Boudreau did a nice job in putting the team together and helping them, of course, lead them to a 6th place finish. Harry Kraft was another manager. There were quite a few managers. Charlie Finley seemed to change them several times a year. I think probably one of the most popular would have been Hank Bauer, who was a Kansas Citian. And I remember as a child he lived in Overland Park when he was playing for the New York Yankees, and he ended up being manager of the Kansas City A's, and I think he may have been the most popular manager of the Kansas City A's because of his identification with the city.
Who do you think were the top A's, while they're in Kansas City at least, of all time, the best players?
Oh, that's it's kind of a tough question because there were some really good players, and as you mentioned earlier, some of their higher accomplishments were made with other teams. Roger Maris, of course, was setting the major league record at the time with 61 home runs. I mean, he did well in Kansas City, but his greatness came in New York. Mentioned Reggie Jackson, of course, who is a legend. He started, I think his first year was in Kansas City with the A's, didn't play much, came up at the end of the year and had his greatness in Oakland, but he obviously was a great player. The other managers, I don't know that any really stand out with me as being particularly great. There were some decent managers. They didn't generally have a lot to work with, but they were, as I say, Charlie Finley changed them so frequently that it was kind of hard to know who was manager at the time.
Right. Well, this is your host, Matt Starr, with the Kansas City Sports History Group. We're going to stop for a break. Stay tuned for more Kansas City sports history. This is your host, Matt Starr, back to the Kansas City Sports History Podcast. Our guest today is Dave Pomeroy, and we're talking about the Kansas City Athletics documentary team. Dave, tell us about the Kansas City A's All-Stars and the All-Star game being played here in Kansas City.
Yeah, that was in 1960. In fact, that's one that my dad and I went to. So we went to actually a lot of the notable games, a lot higher percentage of notable ones than regular games. But that one was in 1960. It was the second major, I think it was the second. There were two All-Star games that year.
Oh, yeah.
One in Pittsburgh and one in Kansas City. But we went to the Kansas City game, of course, on a very sweltering day, sitting in the sun on upper deck on the right field side. But I was at an All-Star game, so I really didn't mind so much. Our tickets were $6. It was kind of a lottery thing. You sent in a check for a couple of tickets, and then they drew out the envelopes, and if you won, they sent you a couple of tickets, and if you didn't, then you got your check back. But my dad and I went. I was really surprised when the letter showed up, and I was thinking, well, our check is back, and I opened it up, and there are two tickets, which I still have.
That's great.
2 tickets to the All-Star game. The representative for the Kansas City A's that year was Bud Daly, and he was a pitcher. He had his choice of either starting the game or finishing it, depending on whether he wanted to pitch a regular season game beforehand. But he chose to be the last pitcher. Came out, I believe, in the top of the ninth to a rousing reception by Kansas City A's fans, and he says that, and we did interview him for the documentary, and he says that was the highlight of his baseball career, even more so than World Series playing for the Yankees later.
Really? Wow.
That the crowd was just, you could hardly control themselves, because here was one of our own, Bud Daly, who now lives in Wyoming. Really, really nice guy. So that's who I remember as far as Kansas City A's players being in the All-Star team.
That's great. Well, there were some interesting nicknames of the Kansas City A's players. I understand Charlie Finley might have encouraged that a little bit. Jim Hunter needed a nickname, so Catfish.
Yeah, Catfish Hunter. Charlie Finley. He was noted for his showmanship. There's no doubt about that, and he liked having players named Blue Moon and Catfish, and I can't remember now some of the other names, but he really did play upon that to get draw attention to his team. So he was he knew how to capitalize on some of his ideas, and he had some great ideas. I was never much of a fan of Charlie Finley's, but he was the one who really got All-Star games to be played at night, so the average person could watch them on television. And normally, people would be at work where they couldn't watch the All-Star game. And the same thing with the World Series, to play those at night as well, so that the average person could watch them. And that was a pretty important change in baseball.
Oh yeah.
To do that. The colorful uniforms. It used to be the home team was white uniforms. The visiting team was in gray. So you definitely could quickly tell which team was home team and which one wasn't. Today they're colorful, and that really started with the Kansas City A's and Charlie Finley. The first uniforms, I think those were the Kelly green and gold. They were pretty colorful but different. And I think it was Chuck Dobson, who was from Kansas City, played with both the A's here and in Oakland. Pitcher talks about how they thought they looked like a bunch of peacocks out there with that color and with all the color. And the opposing team, I can't remember what team it was the first time they played. It seemed like it was the Yankees, but it may have been somebody else. But anyway, the other teams were, made fun of the Kansas City A's because they weren't really wearing baseball uniforms, more like maybe in women's softball or some other sport. And the players really didn't like them at first because it was something different and something a lot of people made fun of. But now you go out there and all the teams are playing with colorful uniforms. I was in Oakland earlier this year to see the Oakland A's and the Kansas City Royals play on a Salute to Kansas City A's night, and they wore uniforms, I think it was from 1965 Kansas City A's. So Oakland was playing those, and it was really kind of nice to look out there and see those old uniforms, which to me don't seem that old, but they were those colors that I remembered, and they looked pretty good.
Now, Whitey Herzog, Dick Hauser, Billy Martin, Dick Williams, Tommy Lasorda, and Tony La Russa all played for the Kansas City A's, and later were major league managers. What an interesting group that would be. Yeah,
of course, Whitey Herzog is well-known manager, did well. I think Charlie Finley fired Billy Martin twice. He had a lot of conflicts with Billy Martin, and he hired him again. Hank Bauer was playing right field for the Yankees, and Charlie Finley named him manager, and he made him move from right field into the dugout to be the manager of the A's. And of course, he too was fired at one point by Charlie Finley, and Hank Bauer had heard that he'd been fired or was going to be fired, so he resigned before Finley got the chance. And Finley called him, says, "You're fired, no longer manager." Says, "I already quit." And so it was a revolving door with managers, and Charlie called the shots, and that doesn't go over real well with a manager. But Charlie had a farm in northwest Indiana, not too far from Chicago, and he would listen to Kansas City A's game, I think through the telephone. They weren't all up on satellite and everything like they are today, but he would make decisions from Indiana of what pitchers to put in to do this and to do that, and that was a large part of the controversy, was he wouldn't leave the team alone and let the managers manage. And he always had to call the shots on the field of something he really didn't know about. So that was some contention. He didn't seem to care too much whether all of his announcers knew baseball real well. He hired the first woman announcer. Not that women can't be good announcers, and today they know the sport they're talking about. But he hired Betty Bushman, who did weather, as he lived in northwest Indiana, so the local TV stations were from Chicago, and he had seen her do the weather on Channel 7 in Chicago. So he called her up, or got a hold of her somehow, and said, "I'd like you to do announcing for my team, the Kansas City A's." So he hired her as the first women's sports announcer. And she came to Kansas City, and she admits that she didn't really, and I don't think today really knows that much about baseball. She was very talented announcer person in broadcasting, but baseball was not her thing. And There was one story, I can't remember, some player talks about her. We do have an interview with her.
Okay.
And one of the players talking about her in another interview, and I can't remember who that was, said something to her about when they were playing the Yankees of Mickey Mantle. And he said something to her about she's a batter over there. It was in batting practice, number 7. Do you know who that is? No. Well, that's Mickey Mantle. Oh, it's kind of like, oh, okay, without really knowing the significance of Mickey Mantle. But Betty Bushman is very, very congenial, hospitable person, very, very likable. But she was thrown into something that probably she shouldn't have been. But, that did set the way for women to get into broadcasting of sports. So that, really helped break that gender barrier in baseball as far as broadcasting goes. And there were a lot of announcers that served Finley over the years, as well as Arnold Johnson. That and Monty Moore was one who made the move from Kansas City to Oakland. In that game earlier this year in Oakland, he made did a little bit of announcing there, and fans loved him there. He was a good announcer. People liked him here, and he's got some great stories related to the Kansas City A's.
Yeah, you think about some of those players that were managers. You look at the history, like the '85 World Series. Dick Hauser against Whitey Herzog, and if you really didn't know, they both played the A's at one time. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, it really is. Those two managers, and also trying to think of the one that played. Was the St. Louis Cardinals for so many years, retired a couple of years ago.
La Russa.
Yeah, Tony La Russa played for the Kansas City A's, as did Tommy Lasorda, played for the Kansas City A's as well. So, a lot of them did become successful managers and legendary managers of other major league teams as well as the A's.
Yeah, Charlie Finley had some very interesting features at Municipal Stadium to draw showmen, including a petting zoo, sheep in the outfield over the wall. Can you tell us about some of that? Yeah,
some of there were some unusual things that occurred at Municipal Stadium with Charlie Finley as owner. Most questions we get from Kansas City A's fans are about the rabbit. The rabbit that was in the ground behind home plate, and if the umpire needed more baseballs, he'd push a button and up would come Harvey with this little basket full of fresh baseballs. His name was Harvey. People always ask about that, and there is some good film of Harvey doing his job, and he did go out to Oakland. I don't think he was ever used out there, and questions are whatever happened to Harvey, and there seem to be several stories related to Harvey still around, or Harvey got destroyed, or nobody knows where Harvey is. I'm not sure where Harvey is, but Harvey was a feature that drew a lot of attention, and also the umpire didn't have to dust off home plate because there was a little machine underneath that would blow the dust off when, so the umpire didn't have to bend over with a little broom and clean that off. And one of the things that players used to enjoy doing when there'd be a rookie come up and not know about that feature was to, in batting practice to push the button and the air flies up in the rookie's face while they're trying to do batting practice. But the sheep out on right field hill, there's a fairly steep hill leading up to Brooklyn Avenue. So there was a second fence, one at field level and one up higher, some feet away from the first one. And so the sheep were out there to, I guess, mow the grass, as sheep are very good at doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a shepherd out there, of course, to watch the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And that was his way to obviously draw attention to, to the team and get publicity. And he was very, very good at getting publicity.
Mm-hmm.
And the petting zoo and was there, and it was always something to see at Municipal Stadium in the Charlie Finley days.
Right. Yeah, Charlie Finley changed the mascot of the A's. Had been an elephant for many years to a mule. The mule was given a name, Charlie O the Mule. Can you tell some more about Charlie O?
Yeah, Charlie was a feature. Yeah, the A's emblem really, came with the Philadelphia A's, which was, I think it was Tom McGraw back in the early part of the 1900s, and that was called the team Connie Mack's White Elephants, and that's
okay.
Connie said, okay, that's going to be our logo, and it lasted up through the Arnold Johnson years, and then Charlie Finley decided that that was something from the past, and he picked a Missouri mule.
Uh-huh.
The name obviously came from Charlie himself, with the O standing, as I understand, for owner. So Charlie O the Mule became the new mascot of the Kansas City A's. One of the things that, and there's some great stories about this, was Charlie took the mule. Mule had an air-conditioned trailer, and took the mule, and there's some really good film on Charlie O the Mule,
mm-hmm.
to some hotels in New York and Detroit, and get the mule into the lobby to register.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that was something that hotel management did not approve of. But the mule would come up to the registration desk in some of these ballparks.
Uh-huh.
But Charlie would take the mule, around to draw publicity. He'd have players ride the mule. One of them, Hawk Harrelson, who now does play-by-play for the Chicago White Sox, was one of them. He rode the mule around the field. I think he got paid a little stipend for doing that, but he talks about how the mule started running, scared the hell out of him, I think is the way he put it. But the mule was there to do promotion. I remember, I think it was John Donaldson who was warming up one time, and the mule was back behind, not directly behind home plate, but a little off to the side. Yeah. And Donaldson threw a ball and hit the mule.
Oh.
And the next day he was traded.
Oh.
So Charlie, I guess, favored the mule over the players.
Very interesting. Uh-huh. Yeah, back to the uniform colors. There were red, white, and blue to start with, and Charlie changed to one of his favorite colors. I guess this kind of relates back to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And he called him Kelly Green, Fort Knox Gold, and Wedding Gown White. What a showman as far as colors.
Yeah. Charlie's farm was pretty close to South Bend.
Oh, okay.
Where Notre Dame is located, and he did pick the Notre Dame colors to represent his new baseball team.
Yeah. I guess he wanted to change the baseballs from white to orange too.
Yeah, he experimented with orange baseballs. I don't have one, but I've seen several, and I know that several guys here in town have those gold baseballs, or not gold, orange baseballs. But it didn't go over real well. I think there were some problems in the play with them. The batters couldn't see the stitches as the ball was coming in, and it didn't go over real well, and was never used in a real American League game. It was used in practice games, I think exhibition games, but never did get adopted, of course. But that was, another another one of Charlie's gimmicks was the orange baseballs.
Right. Yeah, I guess he wanted to move the A's, and he tried to move them several times, different cities over the years, before he's allowed to move them to Oakland. But there was one time he even considered Peculiar, Missouri.
Yeah, he always had a dispute with the city, and always in some conflict with everybody. And he threatened to move them to Louisville one time. In fact, I think he was going to, but the American League wouldn't go along with it. But at one point, he said, "Well, just move them down to Peculiar, Missouri, southeast of Kansas City," which basically was all farmland at the time anyway. That, of course, never happened. But he talked about Dallas, Fort Worth area, which which of course is a major league area today, successfully, and then eventually, after all the talk, and of course that didn't help attendance, because when your team is always threatening to move to another city, it's kind of hard to be too loyal to the team. So kind of lost some credibility with fans, and attendance dropped off until he finally moved them to Oakland. Bill Grigsby, who a lot of people probably recognize his name, passed away a few years ago, not too long ago. Was one of the people who picked up Charlie Finley from the airport when he first moved the team here.
Oh, okay.
And he was in the car, and he said that Finley was talking about moving the team before he ever got into Kansas City.
Wow.
So, it was clear to some people at that point. The rest of us, didn't suspect it. And we were all hopeful that he would build a winning team after, the Arnold Johnson years of losing. Of course, it became the Charlie Finley years of losing, but the intention was to move the team from the very beginning. And now the fans in Oakland are, worried about the same thing, because attendance is not so great there. The Coliseum is, somewhat run down. It's old. It's the old style of stadiums, not really designed for baseball. The Raiders, play their football games in there. But they're talking about moving to San Jose, and there's somewhere else in the Bay Area. Are they going to build a new stadium in Oakland? Exactly what's going to happen. And I remember, I think it was 2009, I was out there for some games, and some fans were holding up signs that said, "Save our A's." So those people are really going through some of the same tribulations that we did here in Kansas City, because they don't know what the future of the A's will be. But they have made some improvements in the stadium. The press boxes are better than they were several years ago, and the stadium looks a lot nicer than it did. But they're still not going to do major renovations. It'd be foolish to put millions of dollars into it when the A's might not be there.
Now, the Charlie Finley made changes to Municipal Stadium to shorten the right field wall or porch to mimic those of Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, he always thought it was unfair that the Yankees had an advantage and could design their team to take advantage of that short right field fence. So he put in the pennant porch, as he called it, that would then make it easier for the A's to build a winning baseball team and actually bring a pennant to Kansas City. So he put in some seats out there, the exact dimensions that are in Yankee Stadium.
Oh, okay.
And of course, the American League said, "No, you can't do that." And well, they do it in New York, though they were grandfathered in. Of course, they kept the same dimensions with a new Yankee Stadium.
Oh, okay.
But that was his thing, and he did have to have it taken out before the first game. And I think it was not too long before that first game when he did take that out, right at the beginning of the season.
Oh, okay.
It was short-lived, but of course, once again, he drew attention to his team.
Yeah, he did a good job of doing that.
Yeah, he was great at it.
Now, the A's shared Municipal Stadium with the Chiefs and later the Spurs as well. That created some challenges in preparing the field, especially at times when both use the field and days near each other too.
Yeah, it did. And I mentioned earlier that field at the beginning of the first year was pretty bad shape. I think most little league teams wouldn't even play on it today. It was really bad. Of course, the construction had just ended, but it really didn't improve all that much until they hired George Toma. And George was, of course, he's a legendary groundskeeper who, is the greatest in the business. And he was doing, I think, some minor league parks and then got offered the job. And people told him, "Don't come to Kansas City. You can't grow grass there. The summers are so hot and dry." And somebody else told him, saying, "Go. If you don't do a good job, it won't be your fault. It's just the conditions." But George turned things around. He was magic with fields, and of course had to deal with both the Chiefs and the A's playing at the same time. Without Municipal Stadium being upgraded for baseball, for Major League Baseball, there would not have been able to bring in a professional football team. Those early years, there weren't too many fans there. I think 15,000 was a good crowd for the Kansas City Chiefs at the beginning, and I got free tickets for a lot of the first games because nobody else wanted them.
Yeah, amazing.
But Lamar Hunt made the American Football League work and made Kansas City a football city, and did great things for the city.
Yeah. Let's talk about the documentary again. Give us an update on that and how people can get involved to help you complete the project.
Well, right now, we've, as I mentioned earlier, we've been working on this for about 10 years. There are two of us, a co-producer, Linda Haskins, and myself. I haven't been paid. I won't get paid. I don't expect to get paid. I'm doing it because I want to. Linda, her job is as a filmmaker, so that's her livelihood. Her story's a little bit different, but each of us have put in, for people of average means, a sizable amount of money to get on tape what we've gotten on tape. Mm-hmm. But there's a limit, and right now we need outside funding. We've done a little bit of fundraising. Raised a little bit of money, not a significant amount, but an amount that helped us do some things. So we're looking for that funding to complete the project. We've shot about 35 hours of high definition video that interviews with players, bat boys, Jim Jays particularly. He was a bat boy, I think, in 1956 and 57. He's got some great stories to tell. I've got an interview with George Toma, who talks about getting that field in shape, and actually a water fight with the New York Yankees. It was fire truck day or something, and as the crew took the fire truck around, they sprayed water on the Yankees, and then the Yankees retaliated the next day. That's a funny story. A lot more complicated than what I just indicated, but it was pretty humorous. And so that was one of the things what we're trying to do. But anyway, we have that film with interviews with George Toma, Bat Boys, interview with, I mentioned, Betty Bushman, with Sam Gould, who had Sam's parking lot. Anybody who went to A's games, a lot of people in the neighborhood park cars in their yards, but the Sam's parking was the big, place for the bulk of the parking. We have interviews with announcers. Monty Moore, Merle Harmon, Bill Grigsby.
That's
We're all
great.
announcers for the A's, and we have interviews with the three of them. There were some other announcers as well, of course, and we have interviews with city leaders and fans, and Frank White, who grew up in the shadows of Municipal Stadium, of course, became an all-star and great player for the Kansas City Royals later, but he talks about the Kansas City A's and his impact when he was a child. But the main thing we need to do is to get the funding to acquire some more video and some more photographs for the project. We need to pay music rights.
Oh.
We will need to hire somebody to do the narration on the film. We have to have liability insurance so that if somebody has a complaint about the content, which I don't think is likely to happen on this project, but you have to be able to, defend yourself there, say music rights. It needs to be closed captioned. That requires some money as well to close caption. The editing process, we don't have any editing equipment. So that has to be leased or rented, or somebody, with facilities to actually edit the film together. So there's a lot of costs behind the scenes that have to be done in order to get a film ready for broadcast, and of course you have to copyright it and all of that and you have to clear all of the material for broadcast and for distribution. So you have to identify where every photograph came from, where every piece of music came from. Permission. We do have releases from all of the people who we have recorded, except for one who didn't sign the release. We have the tape, but not the release. So we have to get that taken care of, and before we can use that person in the program. So there's attorneys to pay, and there's all kinds of fees that take place. As I say, I don't get paid, but I really don't care because I've had a good time. I've met some of my favorite players, my childhood heroes, and that's worth a lot. But we want to tell the story, and we want to do it in time for some of the players to see it. And they've said, "Get it done. I want to see that in my lifetime." And I'm getting to the point to where I want to see it in my lifetime too.
Right.
So we do want to get it completed and have that video history of the Kansas City A's. There is a book called Kansas City Athletics, done by John Peterson, who is a minister in Omaha, who came down and saw games when he was a kid, and it's a great resource, and somebody really interested in reading about it. It's a lot of the details. It's a good book to have. But we want to do the video history so you can see the players, Suitcase Simpson hitting home runs, and a lot of the players, and the stadium itself, and seeing the details of Municipal Stadium when the A's were in Kansas City. And we do have some really good video that we've accumulated, some home movies that people have given to us. Half-hour film that was done by KCMO TV about Charlie O. the Mule. Some great footage in there that we have we can use, and a lot of things from here and there. Was a film done, I think it was 1956, about the A's, done by a commercial company that's in public domain, so we can use that. So we don't have to pay for everything. Some of this is in public domain, which means anybody can use it, and some of it's here and there is up on YouTube, or is available, but we not assembled in the way that really will be telling the whole story of the history of the Kansas City A's.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody's interested in helping you with resources, can they do that?
Well, you can see a 6-minute preview that we did. Includes some of the early tape, not some of the later things that we've done, but includes people like pitcher Lou Krause and others that help tell the story. But you can take a look at that by going to www.take10 Inc. And take a look at that. That Take 10 Inc. is the company that Linda Haskins does, and she produces her films.
Okay, great. That's good.
But anyway, you can you can also call. Got a couple of numbers. Well, you could call me at 785-633-0733, and I'd be glad to to talk to anybody about that, and we'd be glad to come out and make a presentation and outline the costs and everything. So you just contact us one of those ways, and we'll be glad to visit with you about how you could help. Mm-hmm. It's not a cheap thing to do, and we're looking for, as I say, it's not expensive, but we're looking for companies, individuals who have an interest in the history of Kansas City, history of Kansas City A's in particular, and it really tells the story not just of the Kansas City A's, that of course is the focus, and that's what we're doing, but it kind of gives you an idea of America after World War II, the development of the suburbs, the changes of things within cities, transportation. You used to be able to ride the streetcar close to the stadium, take an electric trolley bus down Brooklyn Avenue to 22nd Street, which is what I did, to go to some A's games. Also, when I went with the family, my dad would drive most of the time, but that was it's different today.
Right.
So we take a look at that, the yellow buses that took a lot of people to to see the A's games. And there's some film of Kansas City from the from the 50s. Gives a little bit of flavor of the city, including one that shows the plane that brings the A's into town for the first time. Transportation has changed. That really allowed teams to move west, because Kansas City became the furthest west Major League Baseball team. And once again,
that's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, St. Louis was not all that far east, and they had at one point the Browns and the Cardinals, but they would take trains, and that's another day doesn't take 24 hours to get from St. Louis to Kansas City on the train by any means, but it's additional travel time. And Gus Erniel talks about how exciting it was that they could fly into Kansas City and to other cities. He said before, if they were going from, if they played a game in New York and then they were going to games in Detroit and Chicago or St. Louis to play the Browns, that was a overnight train trip, and it took a while.
Yeah.
And by flying, and you play late one night, and you got to be in another city the next day. You've got an overnight train. Of course, trains ran a lot more frequently then, but still, it took a while, and they really did enjoy the fact they could get from Chicago to Kansas City, or anywhere else, New York, in a timely manner. So that and that did change major leagues, and of course teams then ended up in Los Angeles and San Francisco,
right,
as they moved west from past Kansas City.
Yeah, going back to opening day, 1955. Harry Truman threw out the first pitch, I understand, and Robardo was the mayor back then.
Yeah. He threw out the first pitch. President, of course, he wasn't president at that time. Former President Truman from Independence, and the catcher was, you throw it out to the catcher, and the two catchers. It was, I believe, the Detroit Tigers and Kansas City A's, and Joe Astroth was the catcher, and he threw the ball to Joe Astroth, one of the balls, of course, and to the Tigers catcher, and Joe, gave it back to President Truman, and then a couple days later, Truman gave it back to Astroth, signed from, Joe Astroth from President Truman with the date on it, and Joe. Of course, kept the baseball. He said his kids played with it a little bit, but then he realized that's probably not a good idea, and they decided to put it in a place of prominence in the house with his other baseball stuff, and they did drill a hole in the back of it so that they could mount it on the wall on a peg. So he does show the baseball. And talks about that day with, meeting the president and having the president do that. And he does it in a, Joe's really nice guy. And he passed away a few years ago. But he tells that story and shows the hole in the back of the baseball and, of course, where the president signed it. So it's, and of course, he has other stories as well. But, that's... that opening day was a big thing. We have film of the parade down Main Street in downtown Kansas City, with the players sitting on the back of the convertibles. Spook Jacobs, who he was the regular second baseman in 1954 in Philadelphia, made the move. He said that Boudreaux, the first manager, didn't really care for him, and he ended up in I think he said the last car in the parade, and he kind of got the feeling that was not a good omen, and he got sent down and never really did become the regular second baseman for the Kansas City A's, although he was in Philadelphia. He was a good runner. He stole a lot of bases. He was not a power hitter, but a good defensive player, but unfortunately for him, he did not become the regular first baseman for the Kansas City A's, and finally retired to home in Milford, Delaware, and opened up a donut shop and lived a good life, he and his wife, in Delaware. But that parade, that was a big day. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to the parade. I didn't go to opening game. It was several games, a few weeks before I ever got to a game. I kept thinking, I want to go. But I do know classmates who, I think they had more money, more influence anyway, who did get to opening day and did see those some of those early games. But I'd sure listen to them on the radio. Of course, a lot of them were at day. I went to Milburn Junior High in Overland Park, and it was an excused absence to go to an A's game.
Really?
Yeah, if you wanted to go to an A's game, of course, most of the games were in the afternoon. A lot of them were in the afternoon then, particularly in the spring and fall. So kids would, their parents would take them to the game in school. Go. It's Major League Baseball. Sure, you can go to the game. And the day that Don Larson pitched his perfect game in the World Series, they put it on the speakers in the school, so we all listened to it in class. The last, I think, last inning, maybe 2 innings of that game between the Dodgers and the Yankees. So Major League Baseball was that was pretty special. Yeah.
Was there any other Kansas City sports history comments we have before we wrap up? Maybe related to Blues, Monarchs, Chiefs?
There's a lot of stories regarding the the A's. I thought of one just a few minutes ago that I should have mentioned. Bill Grigsby does talk about the press facilities up at Municipal Stadium, and one game when it started raining and basically of course they stopped play, but how the press box filled up with water, and they didn't quite know what to do at that point. Press facilities were somewhat primitive. There were boxes that were basically hanging around behind home plate, and nothing compared to what you'll find in Kauffman Stadium today. It talks about Bill Grigsby talks about how the announcers would get blamed by people. The team is bad. He says, they get hate mail, and it's kind of like the weatherman getting blamed for the for the weather.
Right.
Obviously, the announcer doesn't cause the weather, nor do they cause a team to lose baseball games. There is a story about I'm trying to think. I know Ken Harrelson was the story about Ken Harrelson was he was the first player to use a batting glove.
Oh, really?
And it came about he played first base, but he was not to be in one of the games, not to start. And so he went out golfing with his buddies in the morning and got a blister on a thumb or something, on his hand. But, it didn't matter because he wasn't playing anyway. Well, the pitcher for the other team, I don't remember who that was, changed, and so they put him in at first base, so he was in the game and would be batting. Well, he's got this blister, so he remembered that he had his golf gloves with him, and so he put one of the put on the golf glove and batted. He said the other team, I think it was the Yankees, made fun of him. They were laughing because you're up there, with a glove. Nobody wore a glove when they batted. And he got a couple of home runs. And so the next day, I guess the batting glove was red. And the next day, the Yankees showed up wearing red golf gloves because it worked for Harrelson, so it probably worked for him. So he is credited with starting the first use of the batting glove, and some people dispute that he was the first, but I was in Texas with my grandson to see games in Dallas and Houston last week, and one of the games we didn't go to, listened to on the radio, and somebody made reference to Ken Harrelson being the first batter to wear a batting glove, of course a golf glove. So there must be some credibility to the story, and Harrelson, of course, says that's what happened, so he should know, and it's a pretty funny story, but part of baseball history.
Right. Yeah.
And right there in Kansas City.
That's right. Yeah. Well, thanks, Dave, for taking your time today about the Kansas City Athletics and your time with the Kansas City Sports History Group. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast today. That's it. This is your host, Matt Starr, signing off. So check back more for Kansas City sports history interviews and podcasts to come.